I was having coffee with an old friend last week. Everything seemed normal. We were just catching up. And then I mentioned a project I was excited about, and he made this comment. It wasn't aggressive, not really. It was just slightly dismissive, maybe a little cynical. And I felt that immediate familiar sting. My first instinct was, okay, challenge him. Ask what he meant. But I didn't. I just watched myself hesitate. In that split second, I ran a calculation. I saw the whole conversation ahead of me. The defensiveness, the misunderstanding, the emotional heavy lifting it would take to get back to common ground. And I didn't have it in me. So I let it go. I smiled, changed the subject, and we finished our coffee. But the energy, gone. And I knew, as I walked away, that I probably wouldn't be the one to text him first next time. I'd wait. I'd tell myself I'll do it tomorrow or next week when I have more energy. It's strange, isn't it, that decision? It felt so small, so rational in the moment, just a simple act of self-preservation. But then you look up, and a year has gone by. You haven't spoken. And you have to wonder, when we make these tiny, reasonable choices to save our energy, what are we actually losing in the process?
That experience you just described, that quiet, almost logical withdrawal, that's exactly where we need to start this deep dive. Our goal today, really, is to dig into the psychological gears turning behind that decision you made. Why do we choose to avoid these, let's call them challenging, relationships to conserve energy? And maybe even more critical, what are the long-term effects? This saving behavior, it doesn't just stay personal. It can ripple out, leading to chronic social isolation, even affecting public health on a wider scale.
Yeah, and that's the core tension, isn't it? It felt like the smart play. I was tapped out, work stress, family stuff. Another difficult conversation just felt like one more bill I couldn't pay, pure self-preservation. But like you're saying, if we constantly frame our relationships as just resources, things to be saved or spent, well, that sounds like a one-way street. It feels like we're setting ourselves up for this kind of entropic decline, everything just winding down.
That's precisely the distinction we have to grapple with. Are we stuck in that entropic world where energy only drains and demanding connections just get pruned? Or is there another way? And, well, the research strongly suggests there is. It points towards niche-entropic creation. Now, that's a dynamic where the interaction itself, even a challenging one, doesn't drain you, but actually generates new energy. Vitality. It leaves you feeling more capable, more resourceful than before the conversation even started. And that difference, it's not just some abstract idea. It completely changes how we should think about connection, about conflict. Okay, so let's unpack why this withdrawal, this drift you mentioned, feels so instinctively right. We really have to see it as a kind of survival mechanism, first and foremost. When your resources, your energy, your time are genuinely scarce, avoiding people who seem difficult or high maintenance, it's incredibly effective in the short term. Some of the thinking refers to our limited capacity as time energy.
Time energy. I like that. It really captures that feeling, doesn't it? It's not just that I lack the emotional bandwidth. It's like I literally don't have the 45 minutes needed to carefully navigate someone's defensiveness without making it worse. If my whole week is just deadlines, complex problems, bills, avoiding that potential conflict seems brutally logical.
Exactly. When your day-to-day life is draining, relationships often get framed almost automatically as energy spenders. The brain does a quick, simple calculation, cut the spending, and the strategy gets reinforced almost instantly. You successfully dodge that awkward phone call or that difficult coffee chat, and you immediately feel the energy not being drained. Phew, dodged a bullet. And that feeling, that little bit of relief, it's positive feedback. It validates the withdrawal. It trains you subtly to pull back whenever you anticipate a challenge or potential hurt. It basically rubber stamps withdrawal as the rational move.
Okay, but if it's just rational self-care, why does it leave that hollow feeling later? Why look back after a year and feel that loss, that gap?
Because underneath that initial, seemingly rational avoidance, there's what we can call the anxiety trap. Anxiety, in this specific context, isn't just, general worry. It's described as an existential emotion. It bubbles up, as one perspective puts it, with the approach of otherness. It's this deep signal. It's warning you that the upcoming experience, that interaction with your friend, could potentially change something fundamental about you, your view of yourself, or maybe how you think they see you.
So when my anxiety spikes in that moment, it's not just saying, uh-oh, this might be awkward. It's more like a deeper alarm. Warning, this interaction could force a shift, a painful one maybe, in your identity, your worldview, or even just how this person perceives who you fundamentally are.
Precisely. And if your past experiences with that person heavily suggest that encounters tend to end in conflict, misunderstanding, or just feeling totally drained afterwards,
Right.
then that anxiety acts as a very useful reminder, doesn't it? It screams, keep away, danger.
Hmm.
Withdrawal then becomes the most logical way to maximize comfort and minimize that perceived threat. You feel the anxiety ease off as you back away, which just confirms, yep, made the right call.
But the real kicker, the tragedy of that rational move, is what it does to our picture of the person we're avoiding. We cut ourselves off from any chance of getting new information that might challenge the negative story we've built up about them.
Absolutely. That narrative you have, he's cynical, she's draining, they're dismissive, it's allowed to harden, to crystallize, as the idea goes. It strengthens because it exists in a vacuum.
Yeah.
You end up with this very confident, self-reinforcing judgment based entirely on old negative data points. And crucially, because you've convinced yourself the withdrawal was about saving precious energy, you have absolutely zero motivation to spend any of that scarce energy seeking out new evidence. Why would you? You've effectively sealed the door against any potentially corrective input.
And this seems like it feeds right into something even deeper, maybe more unconscious, that keeps us avoiding people, this tyranny of needing to have made the right decision.
Oh, this is such a powerful, yet often overlooked driver of pulling away from connections. As human beings, we seem to have this profound psychological need to look back at our major life choices, career, where we live, kids or no kids, how we parent, and see them as the right decision. It feels almost like a necessity. It helps us maintain a stable sense of self, keeps that nagging existential doubt at bay.
Right. So let's say I chose a high-pressure career, long hours, maybe good money, but lots of stress. And then I bump into an old friend who took a completely different route. Maybe less pay, but tons of time for community stuff, family, hobbies. Their very existence, their happiness maybe, can feel like a subtle threat to my own narrative about my choices.
Exactly that. Their presence alone can trigger what's called existential reflection. Their different path just reminds you, even subconsciously, of those original doubts you wrestled with way back when you made your choice. What if I traded meaning for money? What if I picked convenience over deeper connections? That kind of internal questioning, it can feel existentially terrifying. It shines a light on all those what ifs.
Wow, yeah. That sounds incredibly draining and scary. So to shield myself from the possibility that my 10-year commitment to this path might not have been the right decision, maybe even the wrong one, I just slowly, maybe even unconsciously, cut ties with anyone whose life looks like a living counterargument.
It's a form of rational self-defense against that deep existential anxiety. You avoid the person whose life choices differ significantly because they represent a potentially shattering possibility. The relationship gets sacrificed, essentially, to preserve your internal sense of certainty. And you see this playing out all the time, right? The city professional avoids the friend who moved to the countryside. The parent who prioritized career advancement avoids the one who chose to be a stay-at-home parent. It's everywhere once you look for it.
Okay, so how do we stop this? How do we break out of this cycle of defending our past choices by isolating ourselves?
Well, the path forward seems to involve a kind of radical acceptance of complexity. We have to try and let go of this tyrannical belief that for big, messy life choices like a career or where you live, there's always one single right decision to be found. Instead, the idea is to recognize that we only ever make a decision. We choose a path. By accepting that every choice involves trade-offs, gains, and losses, we can lower the existential stakes. We reduce the anxiety triggered by seeing others on different paths. And that, hopefully, allows us to stay connected without feeling this defensive need to reject their reality to validate our own. It's about facing the anxiety of our own finitude, really. We're limited, we make choices, and those choices are never perfect. Now, as individuals are making these seemingly rational choices to withdraw, there are bigger societal currents at play that amplify this behavior. It moves from just a personal drift into something more like a collective issue. And hyperindividualism is a major factor here.
Right, we usually talk about individualism as a good thing, autonomy, self-reliance, freedom, that's the Western ideal often. But hyper-individualism, that sounds different. Like individualism gone wrong. Where's the line?
That's a great question. Classic individualism, let's say, often celebrates the autonomous self, but usually still holds some understanding of collective responsibility, a balance. Hyper-individualism, though, as it's being discussed, really pushes the emphasis onto personal success, personal satisfaction, personal convenience, often at the direct expense of social connection or any thought for the collective good. It tends to frame the individual as this totally self-contained unit, almost disconnected, rather than as a necessary part of a functioning community or society.
And this is fertile ground for that mantra you sometimes see online, I don't owe anyone anything. It might start as a healthy way to set boundaries, maybe with people who are genuinely harmful, but it seems like it can morph into a kind of permission slip for general apathy.
Precisely. That sentiment can become the sort of intellectual justification for apathy. It shifts from, I don't owe abusers my time, to, I don't owe anyone even basic consideration if it inconveniences me. Think about small, everyday relational acts, refusing to help a colleague with a minor task, or declining to help a friend move because, quote, I need to protect my energy, or it conflicts with my self-care schedule. Well, obviously, you're not legally obligated. Consistently prioritizing absolute self-interest over even minor acts of mutual support signals a real indifference to the health of the community, the collective.
It feels like a kind of systemic relational burnout, and it's happening against this backdrop where maybe shared norms and expectations are crumbling a bit. Which brings us to this idea of anomie, the breakdown of the social fabric.
Right. The sociologist Emil Durkheim first talked about anomie in this state of normlessness, usually during periods of rapid social change, that leaves people feeling adrift, disconnected from the rules. But what we're seeing in our current digital hyper-individualized era is maybe an evolution of that idea, something called liberated anomie.
Liberated anomie. Wow, that phrase feels incredibly relevant right now. How does the digital world feed into this sense of being disconnected from society but feeling, I don't know, okay with it personally?
Technology provides the perfect infrastructure, doesn't it? In liberated anomie, people feel, well, liberated to act purely in their own self-interest without much thought for the impact on the group. Digital platforms can reinforce this by enabling these very curated, self-serving echo chambers. You can tailor your information feed, your social interactions. You can almost outsource the messy, difficult parts of human connection to apps, allowing you to focus on self-optimization routines that might actively push collective responsibility to the margins. If your social world is primarily managed through algorithms designed to please you, the need for tricky, real-time human negotiation starts to fade. You feel disconnected from society's messiness, perhaps, but absolutely certain of your own digitally validated self.
And when you combine that personal, rationalized withdrawal with this broader culture of hyperindividualism, apathy, and digital reinforcement, the extreme endpoint looks like severe chronic isolation, like the Hikikomori phenomenon.
Exactly. Hikikomori is a term from Japan, meaning literally something like pulling inward, being confined. It describes this severe form of social withdrawal where adolescents or adults just retreat completely from social life. Often they confine themselves to their homes, sometimes even just one room, for 6 months or more. They systematically avoid participating in school, work, friendships, the whole social sphere.
And the scale of this in Japan isn't just a few isolated cases. It's a recognized social crisis, right? Almost demographic in nature.
It's huge. Estimates vary, but numbers often cited are well over 1 million individuals affected. And the severity is tragically highlighted by something called the 80-50 problem. You have parents in their 80s, often frail themselves, still caring for their children who are in their 50s and have been in this state of withdrawal for decades. It's this slow-motion, deeply embedded crisis that has roots in some unique aspects of Japanese society.
You mentioned unique drivers. It's probably important to touch on those to understand why the isolation can become so extreme there.
Yes, several factors seem to converge. Firstly, there's the Japanese education system. It's known for being highly competitive, incredibly rigid, putting immense pressure on students. It sets these uniform standards, but can also create this almost impossible illusion of infinite possibility if you just try hard enough. So for students who don't meet those expectations, maybe they fail an exam, maybe they experience bullying, which is also a significant issue. The fear of failure becomes overwhelming. Withdrawal can feel like the only way to protect themselves. A psychiatrist named Tomokichi Sato did pivotal work in bringing attention to this.
And then after school, the economic pressures pile on, making it hard to get back into the system if you've withdrawn.
Precisely. Japan's economy, especially after the stagnation that began in the 1990s, saw a significant decline in the traditional promise of lifetime employment. This created a large group of people in precarious work situations, the freeders doing part-time or temporary jobs, and the NEETs, not in education, employment, or training. If you fall off that very narrow, culturally idealized path, good school, stable career, marriage, the sense of shame can be immense.
And shame haji, in a culture that places such a high value on conformity and how the group perceives you, that's a powerful force pushing people into hiding, isn't it?
It's arguably the central driving force. On top of that, Japan has traditionally relied more on the family to provide welfare support rather than having a very extensive public social safety net like some other countries. So when a child withdraws, the family often feels compelled to absorb the problem and the shame internally, keep it hidden. This can inadvertently create what Dr. Saito called the Hikikomori system, where the family dynamics actually end up enabling the withdrawal and deepening the dependency, making reintegration even harder over time.
It sounds so culturally specific to Japan, yet you hear about researchers finding similar patterns, Hikikomori-like cases, in other parts of the world now. Is this genuinely going global?
It seems to be. It reflects the uncomfortable truth that the underlying pressures, intense academic competition, job insecurity, the isolating potential of digital life aren't actually unique to Japan anymore. Cases are being identified across Europe, North America, other parts of Asia. Researchers are starting to use terms like global hikikomorism. They're describing this rise in extreme social withdrawal globally, even if the specific cultural triggers or family dynamics might differ slightly from place to place.
And the COVID-19 pandemic, it didn't just add stress, did it? It almost gave everyone a global masterclass in rationalized isolation.
Absolutely. We already knew from studies of previous quarantines, like during SARS or MERS, that forced social isolation significantly increases loneliness and mental distress. But the sheer scale of the pandemic lockdowns provided this massive worldwide validation for staying home, for minimizing contact, for withdrawing when feeling stressed or overwhelmed. It reinforced those hyper-individualistic tendencies. And researchers are now suggesting that the surge in loneliness and stress-related issues during that period could actually accelerate this trend, potentially making chronic withdrawal seem more normalized, maybe even more common in the years ahead.
Okay, so we've painted a pretty bleak picture. This rational impulse to save energy leads down a path of personal drift and potentially even widespread social withdrawal, this entropic decline. The way out, then, has to be a complete pivot. We need to shift from thinking about saving energy to thinking about creating it. Which brings us to this concept of relational energy, or RE.
Yes, relational energy. It's defined quite specifically as a heightened level of psychological resourcefulness generated from interpersonal interactions that enhances one's capacity to do work. Now, we need to pause on that definition for a second because it really flips the script on our initial problem.
It really does. It's saying that a relationship or an interaction, far from just being an energy drain, can actually be a source of power. But wait, how does that work? How can psychological energy defy, basic physics? If I expend mental energy connecting with you, surely that energy is used up like burning fuel.
That's the fascinating paradox of what's called negentropy in human systems. Relational energy seems to be unique. Unlike physical energy, or even maybe basic mental or emotional energy that gets depleted with use, RE actually seems to increase the more it's utilized. When two people connect in a genuinely positive, energizing way, they don't just sort of swap existing energy packets back and forth. They seem to co-create this synergistic third quantity of energy, something new. And this created energy then fuels both individuals, boosting their capacity to tackle other tasks, to do more work.
Right. So if I have a challenging conversation with a colleague, maybe we disagree, but we handle it really constructively, I might leave that conversation not feeling wiped out, but actually feeling more vital, sharper, more ready for the next thing. That's the negentropic dynamic we're talking about.
Exactly. And this isn't just theory, it's measurable. Research shows quite clearly that relational energy has a positive and significant impact on both job engagement, JE, how invested you feel in your work, and job performance, JP, how well you actually do it. It creates this powerful, positive upward spiral, a virtuous cycle.
Okay, and what's the pathway? How does this RE actually translate into better work being done?
The key mechanism identified is engagement. Relational energy fuels job engagement. And it's that heightened engagement, that feeling of vitality, connection, absorption in your work that then significantly boosts job performance. The data actually showed engagement played a huge mediating role, about 54% in the link between RE and performance.
Hold on, over half the performance benefit from relational energy comes through making the employee feel more engaged first. That's massive. It means you can't just push for performance directly. You have to cultivate the energetic connection that makes people want to engage deeply.
Precisely. And the research strongly emphasizes that this positive energy is socially contagious. It spreads. If one person in a team is genuinely energized, they tend to lift others up. This leads to collective thriving, sharper thinking, feelings of elevation, vitality. And remarkably, even measurable physical health benefits are linked to this improvements in immune function, cardiovascular health. It becomes this self-reinforcing system of well-being and productivity.
So if we want to deliberately build this energy-creating dynamic in, say, a workplace, What kind of people are the energizers? What are the ingredients? What comes before high relational energy?
The research points to psychological capital, or PSYCAP, as a really strong predictor. PSYCAP isn't just one thing. It's a combination of positive psychological resources. Specifically, it includes hope, optimism, self-efficacy, that's your belief in your own ability to succeed, and resilience. Individuals who score high on these PSYCAP dimensions are the ones consistently found to generate high RE in their interactions with others. They're the natural energizers.
But how do they actually do that? It's easy to say someone transmits hope, but what does that look like in a quick chat by the water cooler? Can you give us the specifics?
It often comes down to focus and perspective. An energizer typically doesn't get bogged down solely in the problems or the obstacles. Instead, they activate hope by steering the conversation towards capability. What can we do? What strengths do we have? What's the positive outcome we're aiming for? They foster optimism not with empty platitudes, oh, it'll be fine, but by genuinely conveying a belief in the shared capacity to navigate the difficulty. They might ask questions like, okay, this is tough, but what's the very next small step we could realistically take? That shifts the other person from feeling overwhelmed and stuck to feeling focused and capable of action. Agency.
That makes total sense. It's like transferring a bit of that self-efficacy through the conversation itself. Now, besides PSYCAP, the research also mentions something interesting about humor styles. Apparently, not all jokes are created equal when it comes to energy.
Yes, this was a critical finding, especially if you're thinking about training or team development. The study looked at different ways people use humor. Self-enhancing humor came out as a positive. This is when you use humor to maintain a kind of positive, realistic perspective on yourself, even when things go wrong. Like making a lighthearted joke about a mistake you made, without beating yourself up or denying it. This type of humor was statistically shown to positively impact relational energy. It energizes others, perhaps by modeling healthy coping and self-regard.
Okay, but then there's the flip side, the kind of humor that just drags everyone down.
That's aggressive humor. This was found to have a statistically significant negative impact on relational energy. This is humor that relies on sarcasm, put-downs, teasing, or ridicule, basically used to diminish someone else or their ideas. When someone habitually uses aggressive humor, even if they claim it's just joking or it's just banter, they're actively draining the relational energy from the group. They become de-energizers.
So if I walk into a meeting and make a self-deprecating joke about spilling coffee on myself that could be self-enhancing, maybe it adds a little lightness. But if I spend the meeting making sarcastic jabs about a colleague's presentation skills, even if meant jokingly, that's aggressive and it's actively depleting the room's energy.
Exactly. And interestingly, two other types of humor, affiliative humor, which is joking around to build bonds, and self-defeating humor, putting yourself down excessively to get laughs or approval, didn't show a statistically significant link to RE in this particular study. It really highlights that how you manage yourself internally, self-enhancing, and how respectfully you treat others, avoiding aggressive humor, seem to be the key humor-related drivers of relational energy.
This offers organizations a really practical lever then. If we know things like PSYCAP and positive humor styles can be developed through training or coaching, then these aren't just nice-to-have soft skills, they are direct investments in boosting RE, which then fuels engagement and ultimately improves concrete organizational outcomes.
It reframes the whole purpose of HR or leadership development, doesn't it? Moving beyond just managing problems or deficits towards actively cultivating the sources of energy and vitality within the organization. When you invest in people's hope, optimism, efficacy, and resilience, you get these compounded returns in performance and well-being. Building directly on that idea of relational energy, we also need to consider how this energy creation can happen, even in very brief moments, very fleeting interactions. Because in today's world, so much work and learning happens in temporary contexts, right? Short projects, shifting teams, practicums. So the power might often lie less in deep, established relationships and more in what are called high-quality connections, or HQC.
Okay, so we're shifting gears slightly, not just the big energizing relationships, but the power of the quick positive interaction, even with people we barely know. How exactly are these high-quality connections defined?
HQCs are described as these small moments where both people experience positive regard, a sense of vitality, and feel mutually able to participate in the interaction. The key things here are, they can be very short-term, they happen between two people, dyadic, and they can have a positive impact even if those people are essentially strangers or only know each other briefly. It's really about the quality of that micro moment, the attention, the respect, the feeling of being seen.
Can you give me a really concrete example? Is HQC just like smiling politely as you pass someone in the corridor?
It's generally seen as a bit more intentional than just a passing smile, though that doesn't hurt. It's more like stopping briefly in the corridor, actually making eye contact, and asking a genuine question that shows you notice them. Something like, hey, I saw you burning the midnight oil last night. How's that big project coming along?
Yeah.
And then crucially, actually listening to the answer for that moment. It's about creating a brief bubble of mutual presence, acknowledging the other person as a human being doing their thing.
Now, the research you mentioned looking at these kinds of casual connections, especially in demanding settings like student teaching placements, it apparently turned up some really unexpected findings, especially when compared to formal support systems like mentors.
Yes, the findings were quite striking, almost counterintuitive. In a study focused on student teachers during their practical placements, the high-quality connections they formed with non-mentor staff, think the school secretary, the janitor, other teachers who weren't their official supervisor, these connections, contributed to the student teacher's engagement with their work just as much as the support they got from their formally assigned mentor.
Wow, okay. I find that genuinely surprising. You'd think the dedicated, structured guidance from a mentor would be the most powerful factor for engagement. But you're saying these brief, positive chats with other people around the school carried basically equal weight in keeping them motivated.
Equal weight for engagement, yes. But here's the really crucial finding, the one that speaks directly to avoiding that withdrawal, that drift we talked about earlier. HQC's contribution to building psychological safety, PS, that feeling of being safe to take risks, significantly outweighed the contribution from the formal mentor. When they looked at the numbers, the statistical path from HQC to psychological safety was much stronger, a coefficient of 0.44, compared to the path from formal mentor support to safety, which was 0.25. Okay, that is dramatic. Why? Why would a friendly chat with the school custodian about their garden make a student teacher feel almost twice as safe psychologically compared to a scheduled meeting with the experienced professional assigned to guide and evaluate them? Well, think about the nature of psychological safety. It's defined as that shared belief that it's safe to take interpersonal risks within the team or environment. That means feeling you can ask a dumb question, try a new teaching method that might flop, admit you're struggling, all without fearing you'll be shot down, ridiculed, or penalized. Now, a formal mentor, almost by definition, has an evaluative role. Even the most supportive mentor ultimately has to assess your performance, give feedback, maybe write a report. There's an inherent power dynamic.
Right. They're a gatekeeper, in a sense. So every time I ask for help or admit a weakness to my mentor, there's always that little shadow of potential judgment of how it might affect my evaluation.
Exactly. But those informal, consistently positive interactions with the non-evaluative staff, the HQC moments, they create this broader sense of welcome and belonging. These brief, warm connections signal to the newcomer, you're accepted here as a person, you're respected, regardless of how well you're doing today. This widespread baseline of positive regard seems to build that fundamental sense of safety more robustly, perhaps, than relying solely on the single higher-stakes relationship with the mentor.
So HQC acts as a kind of crucial backup system, a safety net. If my formal mentor relationship is maybe a bit weak, or perhaps the mentor is just really critical, these other small positive connections can stop me from shutting down completely.
That's exactly the idea.
Yeah.
HQC can serve as a vital compensatory mechanism. It helps maintain psychological safety even if the formal support isn't ideal. And it's this bedrock of safety that allows the newcomer, or really anyone in a potentially stressful learning or working situation, to take those necessary interpersonal risks, to speak up, experiment, ask for feedback, all the things essential for learning and growth.
Okay, so if an organization, a school, a hospital, a company wants to deliberately foster this HQC ecosystem, what can they do? It can't just be hoping everyone decides to be nicer, right?
No, it needs to be more structural. Leadership modeling is absolutely key, as always. Leaders need to consciously, visibly model this positive regard and genuine interest in all their interactions, not just downwards with their direct team. If the boss rushes past everyone in the hallway glued to their phone, that sends a powerful message normalizing relational avoidance.
They have to walk the walk, choose that nootropic path themselves visibly.
Yes. And beyond modeling, organizations can implement practical routines, things specifically designed to increase the chances of these positive micro-interactions happening. These aren't necessarily big, expensive team-building offsites. They're often small, embedded structural supports.
What kind of structural supports? Can you give examples?
Things like really intentional onboarding processes, guided tours for new hires that introduce them to people outside their immediate team, formalized introduction routines across different departments, maybe structured orientation sessions that deliberately pair up newcomers with established employees from different areas for a coffee chat. These might seem like minor administrative details, but they work by deliberately increasing the probability of positive brief connections forming. They engineer the environment to make HQC more likely, which helps integrate people faster and builds a stronger, more energized, and psychologically safer culture overall. It's about making energy creation the path of least resistance, rather than entropic drift. #tag outro.
So we started this whole conversation with that small, quiet moment, the rational choice to pull back from a friend to save energy. And we've traced how that seemingly personal decision connects to much larger patterns, all the way to this potential crisis of global Hikikomorism. What we've really uncovered, I think, is that the fundamental flaw in just trying to save energy is that it traps us. It locks us into this zero-sum game, this inevitable entropic decline.
Right. And the research we've looked at offers a clear alternative, a way out. It's the conscious choice to aim for relational creation, not just conservation. When your only options feel like spending energy or saving it, yeah, isolation starts to look pretty rational. But introducing the possibility of negentropy, of actually generating energy through connection, it completely reframes the challenge.
But that path, the path to creating energy, it isn't necessarily the easy path, is it? It seems to demand facing the very difficulty, the negativity that made us want to withdraw in the first place. We don't magically generate vitality by smoothing over the complex parts of a relationship or by avoiding those uncomfortable existential reflections that other people sometimes trigger in us. It sounds like we generate it by choosing to lean into that discomfort.
That anxiety, that initial sting or awkwardness you felt with your friend, that is the signal. That's the invitation almost to create something new. Think about the analogy of a cold shower. That initial blast of icy water is profoundly uncomfortable. It takes a real act of will to stay under it. But what happens right after? You often feel this incredible surge of vitality, mental clarity, warmth even. You feel more energetic than if you just played it safe and stuck with the warm water. In the same way, that anxiety of facing otherness or having the difficult but honest conversation, that's the necessary friction. It's the cold shock that precedes the created negentropic outcome, the relationship that's stronger, the understanding that's deeper. This willingness to endure that brief friction seems to be the only way to actually transcend just shuffling our finite relational resources around until they run out.
The true measure of our capacity for life is not how efficiently we conserve our emotional battery, but whether we choose the brief, difficult act of facing otherness, knowing that on the far side of that anxiety lies the creation of energy itself.